And this is a presentation on compensation management, which is one of Infor's talent management modules. And with that, I give you Jackie and Janna.
Thank you, Keith.
Right.
So a quick blurb on RPI. We are about 90 consultants strong across the U.S. That one always goes right to the next slide for me. About 90 consultants strong across the United States. We are an Infor Alliance partner, and we are CloudSuite specialized.
Compensation management. So compensation management is one module of the integrated talent management suite that Global HR is also a part of, which gives you the ability to automate or systematize processes around talent retention as well as attracting new talent. So GHR is a prerequisite. You have to have that before you can implement comp management. And there's a few things that people think are comp management that are actually part of kind of the core GHR functionality. So the four main parts of comp management are the base pay administration, which is where you set up and manage salary structures, step and grade schedules, and any areas having to do with pay and administration on a mass basis. And that's actually part of the core GHR module. You don't have to implement compensation management to get that functionality. The other three boxes are what comp management is about. So planning and awarding, creating and administering your merit program, bonuses and award programs, incentive comp, where you set up and maintain anything related to sales pay or any kind of comp schedule and formulas and components that have plan entry rules to them. And then the market salary survey is an additional piece of functionality that just helps you to interface your organization's data with various market survey providers.
So just a couple terms here that we're going to define for you. They're pretty basic terms, but you don't always think of them in the concept of compensation. So enrollment, we think about this for benefits and absence, but you can also enroll employees into compensation programs. The way you do that is via custom groups or employee groups or eligibility groups that group people together based on like criteria. And then a compensation schedule. This is a customizable calendar by which you can actually define when people are getting paid out their bonus incentives or different special incentive pay, or define them based on performance periods. So who accesses compensation management? The administrator, of course, has all access to compensation, as well as a compensation analyst. This is the person who's really going to be maintaining your compensation setup, whether it's the incentive pay or the base pay administration. This is the person that's going to kind of own it. The HR generalist as well has a lot of that access. And then the manager and the employee can both get to see either the employee's compensation from the manager side or the employee's self-compensation. We'll show you a couple screenshots in here.
Yeah, so these are just screenshots. The compensation analyst process board has access to these parts of the system. The HR administrators and generalists have pretty much the same access. Some people don't want their generalists to be able to set stuff up, and so we'll kind of configure security to prevent them from accessing certain parts of the comp module.
And here's some of the compensation setup. So when you go in from the compensation analyst or from the administrator or the generalist, these are the things that you can be setting up. So custom groups, those are those eligibility groups again. We have a whole section under incentive comp and compensation planning. This is like the merit pay. Then you have your step and grade and your salary structure. Those are those base pay administration pieces that live under compensation but are really part of basic GHR.
And finally, for the managers, they have a view into their own employees' compensation there under adjust compensation, as well as their merit budgets will pop in for awarding and bonus plans as well.
And this is what it looks like for the employee. So this is my fake record in our test system. This is my compensation by work assignment. So I have two different work assignments here, so you can see the compensation for both of them. My top one is an annual salary amount, and the bottom one is an hourly amount. So you can see it'll be broken out by each work assignment record they have. And then if I had target variable compensation related to any incentive pay, this would be plugged in here as well.
Yeah. So base pay administration, everybody's going to set up various salary structures in which you put your market pricing data or pay ranges. Some are quartile, some are quintile, some have different geographic differentials. The system can handle all of that. In fact, you can set up anywhere from 2 to 7 to 9 different ranges or data points within your range if that's how you manage your base pay administration. If you're an organization that has step and grade schedules, such as public sector, You can set those up to have different rate progression rules attached to them so that people are just automatically moving to the next step and the next pay is assigned to them. And then there's also various rules and guidelines that you can use for validation in the course of merit planning that you can set up here in your base pay administration. And base pay can live, the salary structures and grades pull into the job code initially, and then those pull forward into the position information if you set up your defaulting rules, which can then subsequently pull into the employee record as well. The salary structure is just another example here. It's a tool, obviously, you're using to classify your pay ranges that you assign to the jobs, positions, or work assignments, as I mentioned. So a note here is that on work assignments, you can display up to 5 zones, but if you have more than 5 zones, only the minimum, maximum, and compa zones will be showing on the employee record. And then this is also where you go to do your modeling. If you wanted to model for this entire salary schedule, if we give everybody a 2% increase, what is that going to look like? You do that within these salary structures.
So back to Jana's point about the zones, in this example, we already only have 3 set up, but this is kind of what it would look like on the work assignment for the employee. But you can have many different zones set up, and then you get to choose which one is your compa ratio zone.
Right. Step and grade schedule is just an example of a grade that has various steps to it. And again, you determine the rules as to when somebody moves from one step to the next within a grade, as well as when they progress from one rate to the next.
And those rules can be by hours or by years or however you define that.
Mm-hmm. Resource analysis is the screen where your comp analysts will be able to go in and pull everybody with certain elements. And again, this is a list definition that you can add or subtract whatever fields you need to make this more meaningful for you. And then it's simple to export to Excel, do pivot charts off of it if you need to, or just give to somebody as a report.
We're going to jump from base pay administration to incentive compensation. So incentive compensation is a way to award employees for either hitting a goal, getting a good performance appraisal, maybe there's some sort of special incentive that their manager has requested for them. So there's various ways that you can award the employee. You can do a flat percentage, a flat percent of salary. You can tie it to performance and goals, do a ratio against their performance and goal score. And you can do this either annually, monthly, quarterly. You set that schedule up yourself. So whatever your organization, however often they're administering these bonuses, hopefully more often than not, you can set that up. So we're going to walk through each of the tables that you need to hit when you're doing incentive compensation setup. First one is compensation schedules. So this is where you define how often these bonuses are happening. Are they quarterly? Are they annual? I have 2 examples here, and the payout frequency for each of these is both annual here. Next, under compensation formula, this is where you're actually defining how that amount gets calculated. So for my incentive pay example here, we're looking at the target variable compensation for an employee, which we define later, and we're multiplying that times a component weight. So I'm valuing a pay component, and I'm saying it weighs this much as part of this compensation plan, and I want to multiply it by the employee's target variable compensation. The reason that it's selectable like this is because employees can have different target variable compensation. It's kind of like those variables that you use when you're creating an email template. This way it's not a hard-coded value, and it allows a little bit more flexibility so that multiple people can still be in the same plan. These are the other factors. So we have resource amounts 1 through 5, and then these are the additional factors that you can use to calculate and multiply to get that amount. So you can see there's a lot of things that you can use here, a lot of options to get those values. Here we have a compensation table. So I have the drop down open for you to see how to create this compensation table. My example here is a percent interpolation. This is referencing a performance, a score that's a percentage. This is like a sales bonus that comes from an external metric. I put it in as a percent here, and it's using a percent interpolation between 1% and 199% to match that external percentage score to the percentage on the compensation program. So a lot of words that basically helps. If you get a 60% out in the external metric, it's going to be a 60% on your compensation plan. Next, we have a pay component. This is where we start to see some of these setup items pulled together to create these calculations. So here I have my schedule. So this is my annual schedule. We're going to get paid out annually. Here's my table. This is where I've gone in and explained how we're getting that calculation. And my prorating, what do I want to prorate? Do I want to prorate to the dollar or to the cent? And then there's different types of pay components. I think my example there was a bonus award pay component, but you can use external metrics. You can do a special incentive, which Janna is going to get into in a little bit here. You can use bonus objective pay, which is related to goals, or you can do bonus award pay. So if this is an award outside of goals, you would use bonus awards. And here's a plan entry rule. So when we talk about enrollment, we can use enrollment in conjunction with a plan entry rule. So when do you want your employees to be able to enter this program? Maybe it's once a year, maybe it's, in my example, a month after their hire date. Or maybe you want to set it up so they only get enrolled at the middle of the month. This plan entry rule allows you to define and kind of control when people move in and out of groups. People can be in multiple compensation plans at a time if you allow them to. And when they change, when their criteria changes, maybe they go from a 0.5 to 1.0 and that moves them to a different group, their incentive comp is going to be prorated based on that change, based on the date of that change. And this is where we pull it all together. So this is an incentive compensation program. So we take everything that we just talked about and kind of bring it together here for a person to be enrolled in. So on the front program detail page here, we can set up enrollment if we want to populate people in here based on a big enrollment group. We can do that. We also have our plan entry rule specified here. If you have a program manager, maybe you want to put your comp analyst in there as the contact person to be the program manager. You also have program targets. So in this program, I have one target. So everybody is getting 10% of their salary structure midpoint. You can also use, if I had group targets, there'd be another tab here. If you want to use group targets, you can set up specified percentage targets for different groups. So maybe if I am part-time, I get a smaller target, and if I'm full-time, I get a larger target, but I can all still be within the same comp program. Again, there's that flexibility that allows you to not have to administer so many different programs, but still be able to calculate out those different amounts. Here's my pay components. So in this example, I have 2 pay components, and here's that weight. I'm weighing each one of them at 50%, and I'm saying, how well did you do on your goals? We're going to multiply that by the weight, calculate that out. And then how well did you do on your performance appraisal? And multiply that by the 50% weight. There's also a terms and conditions free text section, so if you wanted to include terms and conditions around the bonus, you could do that, and this will pull into some of the reports that are available and into some email templates as well. So here's the process. Now that we talked through all of that so quickly, here's the process for actually administering incentive pay. You want to enroll your employees first, get them into the programs, and then you can enter your external metrics or complete your performance appraisals, get those metrics or those numbers in that are going to be used for the calculation. Then you calculate payouts. And then after that, you can allow manager review. Generally, this isn't something that the manager's going to probably update like they would maybe a merit, but you can allow manager review for them to just see what the bonus is if you would like to. You can also hide that if you don't want the manager to see it. Mm-hmm. And here's a quick look at the awarding process. So once it's made available to the manager, this is what it looks like for them. So they have the employee at the top, they have different amounts in here, different pay rates, and then here's the incentive pay over at the right-hand side here. So it's showing the amount that they're getting paid out based on all of those calculations that we set up prior. So this is the awarding view for the manager. In some instances, the compensation analyst has to do the awarding themselves. In that case, it looks exactly the same. So it's the same view for the manager and the compensation analyst, and that's pretty helpful when a manager calls in and says, I don't know how to process this. Can you please help me? They're going to be seeing the exact same thing. You don't even have to try to proxy, and it's pretty easy to translate the two.
So other comp planning and awarding functionality that's delivered with the system, there's a number of delivered actions. There's processes for awards, approving salary awards, approving focal awards, changing the pay rate as an action on the employee record, changing the position pay as an action against a position that would then go out and update all the employees associated with that position. The individual business objectives, completing those, it has a process behind it that can go different routes if you need it to, as well as requesting a new job or a special incentive. So there's a lot of delivered functionality that you can work with, but of course, as we know, IPA will also allow you to create any and every process you need to automate within the system as well.
Or even reports. If you need a special report, you can use IPA.
Yeah. So a couple calculation options when it comes to merit planning. You can either have focal awards based on a particular time of the year or anniversary awards based on people's individual anniversaries. And those comp awards then follow an approval process, and those awards can be approved or rejected with comments depending on what you need. So request special incentive is kind of a ad hoc, separate from what Jackie was describing with a formal incentive comp program. You also have the ability, if somebody has a spot bonus program or a bonus program for performance, that you can just request a special incentive as a manager, send it wherever it needs to go for approval, and then there's an additional process to pay it out once it's approved that connects it. You'll see this pay component field here that actually connects, and in version 11 you actually have some IPA flows that export that over to payroll on the S3 side. So older versions, you had to kind of download this data and send a file to payroll to key off of, or for them to try and upload into their system. And with version 11, now you've got those two systems connected much more nicely for you.
If you're not on version 11 yet, I've also seen an IPA to notify payroll that there's this special incentive so that they can create a lump sum payment for the employee just via email. So you don't have to worry about downloading that file and putting it somewhere for the PR 530 to pick up. It's just an email or some other notification that goes to payroll to let them know.
Compensation awards. So you've got a process for awarding based on actions which can be approved. So things like lump sum payouts, bonus payouts, or mass pay changes. You've also got the whole merit, that's all right. You've got the whole merit, yeah, we had an example on that one. So you've got a comp analyst a budget and then finalizing it, which pushes it out to the managers. And then the managers can put in what they want to recommend for their employees and send it back, or up, I should say, for approval potentially before it comes back to comp to finally approve into the system and update the employee's record. So there's a lot of delivered functionality that you can then change to match your process. The example, very similar to the screen Jackie was showing, I think partly because your incentive comp piece was pulling into your merit planning as well. So for those of you still doing your merit increases on spreadsheets, you can get the system to look just like that spreadsheet with the columns that they're used to and have them be editable where they're used to them being editable. You can also, we'll show you in a little bit some configurations that you can make. Now this again is a list definition that you can modify and add and subtract fields as is relevant to your merit awarding process. And then down below you have tie-ins to things like the salary structure where you can show the mid, and max for that grade. You also can have guidelines for, what's an acceptable increase given certain things like their overall performance rating with where they are in the range. You can also pull in history if you want to show the last 3, 4, 5 years of performance appraisal ratings. You can pull that in as well. There's a couple other tabs here that populate depending on your configuration, but generally, you've got what managers are used to seeing in a spreadsheet format here. They'll have a list of all their employees, and you'll also have a couple other columns, pages here, totals, where they can see, okay, how much of my total merit budget have I assigned and how much do I have left to play with.
And these progress bars also give you an idea here. You can see we're a little bit over here, so it lights up red. And the way these different tabs at the bottom show up is when you create a planning rule for your merit awarding, there's also an awarding view that gets created at the same time. And the way we can get the incentive comp to show up in the same awarding view as the merit is to just tie that to the same awarding view. And then on that awarding view, you have checkbox options to include things such as guidelines or thresholds for that appear at the bottom section here. In addition to that, though, just like you can add columns here, you can also add fields down here, maybe different calculations via configuration console if you want that additional information.
Yeah. So your goal is to give your manager everything they need to make that decision and the best recommendation. With bonus awards, there's a couple ways you can set them up, kind of similar to the incentive comp. As Jackie mentioned, you've got flat percentages, you've got a percent of salary, you've got ratios based on performance and goals, as well as annual bonus or monthly or quarterly, however you have that.
So pay rate processing, once you've made these merit increases or seen these incentive compensation awards, the way that they get updated to the actual employee record is via this pay rate processing on the Compensation Analyst process board. So when you click pay rate processing, we have a few different options here. The mass pay rate is what actually pushes all of those merit increases. Maybe you give everyone a 3% increase. That's going to hit their work assignment on top of their pay rate. So it's going to be a mass pay rate change action. It's going to update their work assignment. It's going to trigger an export record, and it's going to go to the LT11, and that's how the pay is going to get processed out of S3. For things like lump sum payments, like we talked about a little bit earlier, that now in version 11, that's a delivered interface. Prior to version 11, it's going to be a CSV file that you export and drop somewhere for the PR530 to pick up and process those payments. Or you could just create a CSV file, send it to payroll, they could key it in themselves.
Compensation reporting. There's a couple delivered reports, and you can always create reports from any list that's in the system to get that to work for you. But for the delivered reports, there's two areas. There's the market survey reports to help you interface with your market salary survey providers, and there's some analysis templates for the comp analyst to look at data by org unit, by supervisor, or by salary structure. With the market salary reports, if you want to go ahead and it's just a tool that helps you do the analysis and compare your organization's compensation for certain key positions against the market pricing. So it's fairly simple to set up your market survey provider and then start to create positions that are the positions this particular survey provider uses or gives data on, and then finally link your own positions or jobs to that market provider's positions. Once you've done that amount of setup, you can then dump out in the next set of reports that comes up. I guess I didn't do a screenshot of that, but you can do the report that exports to the provider with your position data, as well as your actual employee data, which can also facilitate some discrimination testing sometimes if you need to do that as well. So configurations, we talked a little bit about how these screens can be configured. This is an example of a field. One client had a requirement that if the merit increase the manager was putting in was outside of the guidelines that was recommended, they wanted to force them to put comments in so that those reviewing it for approval could understand why was this justified and going outside of the guidelines that was given. So this is a field that we created. It's conditionally required, and the condition is when it's outside of the guidelines for the Rule 1 award. That pulls in here, this final outside guidelines comments field is that particular field pulling in. And you can also see there's some warnings against some of the fields. So we've got red exclamation points and red amounts and stuff like that. That's if you hover over it, it'll say outside guidelines on the exclamation point. So this is all a list that's been modified to have the fields, including this additional custom configured field, pulled into the view. And then this is the comp analyst. As Jackie said, the comp analyst can see the exact same thing. However, if you modify the manager view, you want to remember to go back and modify the comp analyst view as well. So the same fields and values pull in for the comp analyst to see.
Yeah, because even though it's the same view, it's different pages, different forms. So you want to make sure that they're seeing the same thing. Some other configurations that we've done that we don't have screenshots of is just if you wanted to add additional fields to the list view on the manager view. Things that are easy, like job, position, department, those are all selectable options from the awarding view. But if you wanted to pull in maybe like a grade description or a salary structure description, that's kind of more configuration console stuff, but it's pretty easy configurations that you can pull in to enhance the manager's view.
Interfacing to S3, we've got pay rate changes, as we mentioned earlier, that in version 11 now can actually be exported and connected to the HRM payroll product. Lump sum payments can also be processed with a CSV file and uploaded into the PR 530. So you do have a kind of a combination depending which part of the system you're using.
Yeah, so a couple implementation considerations, just things to think about as you're moving forward with compensation. You can use GHR without fully deploying the compensation module. So you can use those base pay administration pieces without doing merit and incentive comp. So you can take it on kind of piecemeal and not have to dive into the whole comp module at once. If you are going to administer merit or incentive comp, do you have manager and employee space up and running? Might not be great to try to do those two things at the same time, because you might run into issues with some of your manager space or your employee space, and you want to make sure that is fully up and running, and maybe make sure your managers are used to using that web UI before you unleash them on changing pay rates. Do you administer merit increases? Is this something that you want to take out of spreadsheets and put into the system? Do you administer promotions with salary awarding? When do you administer all of these types of things? And then do you want to have validation built into the system, or do you want to just let the manager enter whatever values they would like to, or do you want to have those guidelines or thresholds or validation criteria built into the system? Are you planning on using performance and goal? And if so, do you want that to have any effect on the compensation module or the way that you award employees?
And just a word about performance and goals. Your performance management reviews or appraisals have to be in a certain status for that overall rating to pull into your merit budgets. So a lot of times organizations have performance appraisals going on right before merit. There's some overlap. They've got managers out of the office, or some reason they can't close them out. There is an ability to upload those overall ratings into the merit budgets once you create them. So you're not at a total impasse if you don't have your merit reviews all nice and tidy and fully approved by the time you're ready to roll out merit.
Yeah. And then the last piece here is just around market evaluation. So that's that market salary survey piece. Do you perform them, and are you sending any data to a third-party provider? Do you want to bring that in-house? Do you want to bring that into GHR, or would you rather continue to use that third-party administrator? And with that, I think that's it for us.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? No questions?
So I have a few questions, and obviously if anyone online has any, please have anyone will ask. So when I'm looking at implementing compensation management, most organizations implement GHR first, is usually what we would see. What sort of timeline am I looking at? I know it varies a lot by organization, what they're trying to do. What adds complexity? Is this a 3-month project, a 6-month project?
I think it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So if you're just trying to get merit increases up, that's like a 2 to 3 month project, just doing that. But if you've got a larger project where you've got incentive comp that you need to build out and test, along with your merit budgets, you want to give yourself a good 3 to 6 months to get through and test all those iterations.
And even longer if you're using performance and goal and want to link that to it as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, approximately 3 to 6 months.
So that would be where performance is feeding in.
Yes.
You know, how you're going about those raises. Okay, so it's not a humongous effort to get in place.
No.
And a lot of value that it can deliver.
Yeah, because now instead of spreadsheets that you've got to combine and roll up and unlock, you've got all the data in the system now that you can dump out.
And not to mention the audit log. Your spreadsheets don't have the audit log that GHR does, so you can see who's making the changes and how often it was updated.